Buckle up. You've just hit the play button on The Notice, a podcast from OTAVA with hosts TJ Houske and Melissa Lock. Expect to laugh, nod vigorously, and maybe even fist pump as we dive deep into the tech that powers your business, leadership that uplifts, and how culture can make your company the kind of place where everyone wants to clock in. So if you're ready for insights that stick and laughs that last, you've got a seat at our table. Welcome to The Notice, where tech gets personal and growth is a group project. Let's get started.
All right, Mo, we did it. Episode 11, season 2. We're still going strong.
Can't believe it.
Can't believe it. So, well, stoked. So today, thanks for joining us. We are going to talk about mentoring. For those that don't know, I guess we should do better about this. We're still kind of learning this whole podcast thing in 2 seasons. So I'm TJ Houske. With me is the boss, Melissa Lock. So excited to spend some time with you. We're going to work on improving on that opening as I think about it, because most folks are like, who are these people? Like, why should we join? And so, but excited to spend time. In today's episode, we're going to spend some time talking about leadership from a perspective of mentoring within an organization, the impact that it can have on your career and ways in which to really think about that. We have a special guest as we start to talk about some of the tech elements within what we do, OTAVA, and who we are. And that's Mr. Jason Pohlman. He's one of our field CTOs, specializes in our public cloud product set, and that is our partnership with Microsoft Azure. So that'll be fun. So really looking forward to that. So, well, as we kind of jump in, Mo, I mean, we talk about this a lot. We use words like coaching, right? And when we use the word mentoring, to me, the way I would frame this up for today's conversation is it's really just a whole nother level of ownership in the coaching journey, right? Like coaching by nature is more in the trenches, elbow to elbow, like working with somebody, helping them row the boat, so to speak. Mentoring really transitions into that next level of empowerment. So you've put somebody in a position based on the success framework that you've worked together with them in to say, hey, here's what success looks like, and here's how we're going to measure that. And then mentoring is that opportunity that somebody gets to come back to you throughout that journey to help them further that, right? So you're not really paddling as much. You're more like a rudder to the ship. They're paddling, you're helping steer and keeping them on course. And being an effective mentor is really learning how to coach over time and, duplicate that out. So did I set that up well? Is that kind of aligned with the way in which you view mentoring similarly?
Yeah, I mean, it's really sharing your expertise and your experience. Sometimes we overcomplicate it and think that, well, there's no mentoring going on around here because we don't have, nobody signed a form and nobody put a start and end date on it. And nobody set expectations or success criteria, but it happens informally all the time. And I think, at least at OTAVA, we have a pretty good group of leaders who do like to share and pour into our employees. We don't have to recreate the wheel all the time. We can learn from some of the things we learned the hard way. We can share that experience and help folks get a leap ahead because of it. But it starts, I think, with trust. I think we talked about that many times throughout this podcast, but it's hard to be a mentor or to ask someone to be your mentor if you don't already have some sort of relationship or trust or something that would connect you and make you feel like you could lean into someone or allow them to pour into you. It goes both ways.
Yeah, that's a home run. I think, to your point, like it'll sound like such a repetitive statement, but everything that we talk about here, our goal in this podcast in general was to really focus in on our passion, which is people. And certainly connect that to technology. It's who we are as a company and what we do. But I think to get to see behind the scenes, which is what this was entirely about, and to connect to other thought leaders and folks in the industry to help them get a perspective on the people side of this that orchestrates all of it. This is a really important concept to understand, that trust is the root of all of it. And people, they gloss over it. They say it in generality, like, oh yeah, it makes sense, trust. Everybody defines trust a little bit different, right? You have to know that relationship equity also comes with, understanding the scar tissue to each person involved. And so if you're building a relationship with somebody and maybe they come from a background where they've had terrible relationships, like people that have betrayed them or gossiped about them or stabbed them back, like personal lives affect professional experience, right? Then you really have to understand that to get to a mentor position, what mentoring really means is that there's no question of trust anymore. They've gone past coach. You've rooted yourself that you're somebody that the person you're working with and influencing has let go. They fully believe that you are somebody that they can consistently count on. Well, that takes time. That's going to take some really intentional effort in relationship equity, building trust, and doing that. But it's a really beautiful thing when it comes to pass, because now somebody counts on you and they know I can go to that person, for mentoring. And I think one thing I would share in this area as we kind of get a little deeper into this conversation is, I think you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes people look for this formal, you're my mentor. Like it just kind of naturally happens with consistency in the relationship over time. And sometimes it can also happen with people that aren't directly in your life. And what I mean by that is like John Maxwell. I went through his university. I've been a part of his program for almost 15 years. Indirectly, Maxwell University, and those people that are part of that organization mentor me on an ongoing basis in my life. And that is because I trust in that system. I've spent a lot of time in that ecosystem. I consume from it, and I'm able to now influence and share. So it can come directly and indirectly, but it is still rooted in trust. I trust consistently that is a place that I can go as a source of truth that I can rely on. And I've seen dividend from it that I can pay that forward into other people. So it's a really important concept. And I'm glad that you framed it up for that, because you're right. It's not like Mo, will you be my mentor? It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Right.
I suspect that there probably are some programs or some opportunities that present in that way, that it may be just an expert in your field or an expert in your industry that you kind of may get paired up with in some way and say, hey, could I call once in a while and get some advice? And that's still a mentor. But I think true career changing mentorships are foundational with the trust, because they are someone who you are willing to take wholehearted feedback from, that you're able to be vulnerable with and share some of your biggest questions or mistakes. How do I fix this? Or I'm going into this, hairy situation, guide me. That really help you through.
Yeah, this kind of dovetails into law of the inner circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, we've been going through the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership as an organization. It was our guiding star this year in terms of corporate reading, to unify our organization, have a community effort to say, hey, like we want to grow together as we go together through this journey. And so we chose, John Maxwell's 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And this week, one of our teachings, our focus areas, was the law of the inner circle. And really, that's a different way of saying a circle of mentors, like people that you have put into your closest group, that you're giving permission to speak into your life, personally or professionally, in different areas, that have demonstrated trust. Like they've demonstrated the outcomes that you want, and they've demonstrated that you can trust them. And so you are consistently allowing them to be that source for you of guidance. And I know that is a great example of, who is that to you? How do you develop that? So do you want to talk a little bit about that? I think Andy Felt over our technical services group did a fantastic job of steering everybody through it, this week. But Mo, you want to talk a little bit about the connection between the two? Because I think it's powerful and the timing is really relevant.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few. There are some core values or descriptions of people who can be in your inner circle. Like there has to be some alignment. And some of those were on your values or on positivity, like your attitude. You kind of have to mesh and work well together. And so some of those things are why individuals naturally you gravitate toward, because of that alignment, and they're better match for mentorship because of those things. And I think that being receptive to your circle is a big part of it too, and that maybe that we could call that the mentee piece of it, and that you're willing to take feedback and accept it. So you have this inner circle of folks who are smarter than you, align with you, and then allowing them to pour into you, and you're taking that and growing with it. And hopefully, and the law right after Inner Circle is the law of empowerment, which ties right into all of this
That's right.
too, because, and then you're empowering those around you with this, from those who've poured into you. So I feel like those kind of go together, Inner Circle and empowerment with mentorship.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Well, let's give folks an opportunity to have some steering. Like, where do you start? So maybe you're sitting on here and you're like, hey, it sounds great. Like, I don't have a mentor. Like, how do I go get a mentor? And in my 20s, I was one that was hungry for that. I was looking for, like, where can I go get fed? Because I'm hungry. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to go forward. So here's some clear, helpful direction from the two of us. One, you first have to sit down with a journal and a pen, and you have to identify for yourself, what are your non-negotiables? And I'll tell you why. So for me, it's very easy. My non-negotiables are, I don't do drama. So drama can come in a lot of different ways. I don't do gossip. I don't do it. I don't let it in my life, and I won't produce it into somebody else's life. So that's a non-negotiable for me. If you're a drama-filled person, you won't be a part of my life. And I'm comfortable telling you, I'll cut you right out, right? Number two is, I don't take advantage of people, which means I won't let people take advantage of me. So as soon as I start to get to, I feel like you're trying to push the boundary here to take advantage, I'm going to cut you out. I'll call you out, then I'm going to cut you out if it doesn't change. Very, very quickly, very, very close, right? And the third one is, like, I don't lie. I'm not going to lie to somebody about that. I'm going to, I do find ways to deliver the truth in a way that honors somebody. I'm not out to hurt somebody intentionally, but I don't put up with people intentionally lying to me too, right? Mm-hmm. And by identifying my three, and I believe you can't really go more than 3 to 5. You have to get deep into your root system of who you are and who you aren't. Then you can start to say, now I'm going to look for like-minded people. The reason why I say you have to start with you is, a lot of times humans by default are growing up in a world where it's trying to shape their identity and tell them who they are and who they aren't, which means a lot of times people struggle with insecurity. And so if you can first figure out who you are and who you aren't and focus on your non-negotiables and be comfortable and confident in that, you're then going to be able to identify who's like you and who you want to be near. And the more that you spend time with those people, the more you start to have an opportunity where mentors are going to show up, coaches that you allow to participate in your life, and you're going to be like-minded. That's your first step. Sit down with yourself and a pen and some quiet time. It might be quick. You might know. It might take you a little bit of time to really explore who you are and who you aren't. But you have to first figure out who you are before you can go out and let somebody start speaking into your life that, done the wrong way, they could start steering you down a path because you're not really comfortable and confident in your own self yet and have built that up, that wastes your time, or worse, turns you inside out, kind of turns you into somebody, that you're not. So that's my first coaching, is sit down with yourself and really figure that out. Mo, I know you've got great wisdom around this. Like, where did you start as you started to go through your journey?
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head on figuring out who you are first. I attended a session a couple of months ago, and it was Build Your Brand. The way I summarized it was called something much better than that, but that's the way I would summarize it. But you started with listing out your values. And so those values then were you did a couple exercises, put into a statement of this, basically, this is who I am. So this is where I don't negotiate on how I make decisions, or who I work with, or who I allow to lead me. So that reminded me of that session. But I can remember my first mentor, and it was not formal, but it was someone who I guess just realized I might be able to do something more. And she just really poured into me and gave me opportunities and pulled me into meetings that I didn't even know why I was there, but I got exposure to how those conversations went, how decisions were made. I got brought into one-on-ones before I was like the formal HR, and kind of just see how those conversations would go. And so I got to have some hands-on, really see examples of how we work, or how, I might grow myself and develop. And so that was Joan Barrett, and she was the general manager of a TV station in Wichita, Kansas. And she pushed me into the HR field. I started in accounting. And so she just poured into me a lot of some of the things I say today came from her that I still say, like fair is not equal. That's a Joan Barrett statement that's drilled into my brain. So I give her a lot of credit, and she made a big impact on my life, and it was very informal. It was just our day-to-day work interactions, but she made a point to ensure that I had good feedback and participated in opportunities that I normally wouldn't have been because of my role. So it can really make a difference. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, I would say, just kind of closing on this segment, as you think about it, mentoring is a privilege. It's a genuine privilege. And you have to understand the responsibility attached to it, that somebody is coming to you for advice. And that requires thoughtfulness on your part. But the thing that I notice for folks that say that they want to mentor or coach, right? But they want to start with coaching and then work their way mentoring, is humans are messy. And so you have to be willing to get messy with people, meaning you have to invest time. You have to get to truly know somebody and have a desire to want to get to know somebody and how to make a positive impact. And that doesn't stop. That is not something that you can like start, stop, and turn it off. Now, I will tell you, as you get into mentoring, you're going to have different callings and different assignments at different times for different seasons, for different lengths. So there's some people that I've been fortunate and blessed to be a part of their life for decades and have a chance to consistently be a part. And there's an assignment there that I understand and can recognize. There's other people, it might be a short season. It might be 3 months, 6 months, might be a circumstance, right? And so as you get more and more involved in this, just know that as you're opening yourself up to say, not only do I want mentoring, I want to be a mentor. Here's why. You always have to give to get, always. It's the law of reaping and sowing, always. So you will never be in a position where you can just go get mentoring, but not give mentoring, right? Your responsibility is to be a funnel, not a bowl. So if you want a great tangible example and a good summer read, my favorite all-time book, second to the Bible for me in my life, is a book by Andy Andrews. Shout out to Andy Andrews because he's my favorite speaker other than John Maxwell, and I would love if Andy would show up. So, but he has a book called The Noticer. And that's where we came up with The Notice, right? And that's shout out to Josh and Cassidy saying, like, we should connect this. And he's written The Butterfly Effect and, Jones and The Noticer Returns, but The Noticer is where you start. That book, in a fictional story, is really about mentoring and the impact that mentoring has, service, which is what mentoring represents, on the lives of other people and how it changes you in the process. That's my favorite thing about mentoring, is what it does by giving yourself away to other people and wanting to make a meaningful impact in their life, what it does in your own life. And I'll never be able to put money on it about the impact that it has and the blessing that it brings. So it's really powerful. So I highly encourage, check out that book. And if you do read it, reach out, give us a comment, give us a share, and let us know what you've learned through it and what chord it struck, in your own life, because it's a lot of fun. The Audible is just as good as the book because he narrates his own story and he is a storyteller and he is brilliant at it. So, enjoy it. But, well, Mo, shout outs to mentors. Who would you shout out, top of your head, couple that have just made massive impacts that you would love for them to know?
Well, I mean, the one that always comes to mind is Joan, just because she's the reason I'm even in this field. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself and gave me the confidence by pouring into me regularly because I needed a lot. And she just did so effortlessly and made me feel good about it and not like I was screwing something up in the way that she guided me. And so that's definitely my number one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a shout out to somebody that folks are like, what house? There's a gentleman named Ron Reynolds. Ron Reynolds was the ghostwriter for Jim Rohn. So if you've ever read a Jim Rohn book, Ron Reynolds was his ghostwriter. Ron wrote several books, and actually his background, like he literally was a rocket scientist for NASA. And for whatever reason, I was allowed and got blessed to be a part of Ron's life. And Ron took the time to spend a season of my life for a good 5-6 years mentoring and just giving me advice on speaking, on thinking, on coaching, on serving other people, on being a community advocate, and what that meant, which he summed up as, if you truly want to be a change agent in life, this is what this means. This is who you'll have to become to be that. And so, second only to my faith, and, I'm very open about what Christ has done in my life. Ron Reynolds has made a massive impact in my life and inspired me to want to go out there and learn from, the John Maxwell's of the world and the Jim Rohns and the Jim Collins and others about doing it. And so, huge mentor in my life, allowed me to punch way above my weight as a result. And it's been really fun to take a lot of what he's taught me and put in me and share it in organizations like OTAVA and other companies that I've been able to do coaching and speaking for. And so love it. It's really, really cool. All right. Well, we are back for a fun segment. So my favorite part about the notice and what we get to do is the diversity of content. So we spend a lot of time talking about leadership. We like to dig into technologies. More importantly, we love the marriage between people and those technologies. And so I'm excited that I get to introduce you, JP. So this is Jason Pohlman, who I'm thankful has become a good friend here at OTAVA, but also just has a tremendous background in the industry in a lot of different roles. And I'll let him talk a little bit about that. But on today's segment, and more specifically for JP, as I call him here at OTAVA, he is what's called our Field Chief Technology Officer, one of two. Ben Stiles is our other partner in crime. And Jason has a passion and a focus around really the public cloud portion of our multi-cloud offering. And for those that are maybe learning and tuning into OTAVA here newly, we are a Microsoft Azure shop. And certainly we have experience with the other footprints, but what we've seen from market intelligence and the like, and we'll talk about that today, is the enterprise demand, right? And then you add, artificial intelligence and machine learning and database support, and the list goes on and on. Microsoft Azure is great, and you can see the alignment there and how they've taken market share, particularly over the trailing 3 years. So without further ado, JP, welcome to the notice, and why don't you introduce yourself and share with folks your background? I think it'd be awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yes, happy to be here and happy to do this. So it's been quite some time that I've been in the IT field ever since college here at Purdue University, and then working in the computer labs, and then getting a job and kind of cutting my teeth for 12 years at a very large law firm. And when you have 300 bosses, you learn a lot about technology, a lot of late nights, a lot of different things. So, but I left there and wanted to cut my teeth more on the enterprise side, and then went to go work for HP Enterprise Services. So running global data centers for Allison Transmission. So got a lot of experience there, and which made me rethink in my career path, because of one thing and one guiding light, and that was I wanted my weekends back. So I went into I went on the other side of the house. I'm glad I had those many years in operations, because it gives me a unique perspective of how I'd want to be treated, and how I want to treat our customers and clients on this side of the fence, on the sales side. So I initially jumped into Dell EMC for a couple of years as a core engineer, and then on the pre-sale side. And then I got a phone call one day about a little cloud company called Online Tech, and I was very intrigued, liked what I saw, liked the people, and have been here now for the last 8, almost 9 years.
That's awesome.
But like you said, I started out here as a senior architect, and then architect director, and then various other roles, but kind of landed a couple of years ago directing our public cloud practice. And we have seen a little bit of success here that I'm very proud of, and continue to see success in this, and branching out and adding enhancements to our product set. So very passionate about it, like you said earlier.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great background, and thanks for sharing. I think hopefully, particularly if you're maybe part of the audience that tunes in and you're interested in just career, in IT, Jason certainly is sharing something that I find to be really powerful, which is there's a lot of different ways to add value in technology. And so, it's very common. Most of us started out like we love tinkering. We started when we were younger. You kind of end up in this like what I call traditional enterprise IT help desk role. And what I love about that role, and people can appreciate this if you're in the industry, is you figure out how quick you don't want to do certain things. So some roles you're like, okay, I don't like that part of IT. And but what's nice is it'll steer you into the right path, whether it's more of solution and architecture design. Some folks really like that. Some of it's infra engineering, where you're deeper into the hardcore stuff. Some of it's administration, where it's kind of a little bit of a balance between both, more customer facing. And then some of it's true sales, where it's like sales engineering, and you're spending your time doing that. But what I love is that there's room for everybody. The space continues to grow, and all of it now, we'll talk about this today in our segment here for just cloud in general, and more specifically public cloud. It's now common practice, right? Cloud in general is a part of natural conversation. There is no more what percentage of companies are adopting cloud. You have pretty much full adoption in different flavors, whether it's on-prem private hosted cloud for enterprise customers themselves, or they're going with a third party like an OTAVA or some of our competitors, or they're going with a public cloud partner. Cloud is not a nebulous concept anymore. People get it and they're like, yep, we use it and this is how. So I think it's fun to watch and see it evolve. So great background, great share. And I hope people caught the nuggets in that. So good stuff. Well, JP, let's talk a little bit let's start with just some history to present time, right? Like, what have you seen in your perspective? Cloud's changed, right? The conversation about cloud remains similar in the sense of you have workloads, you want to figure out where you place those workloads, right? But especially, just the public adoption of, Chat GPT, right? OpenAI's GPT. And what that really did was just open the eyes of people of a technology that's been around since the 1950s, but now more readily available, and then you have now the evolution of Copilot as a result, right? A spinoff from that tied together with OpenAI and Microsoft. Cloud is becoming different, right? In the way in which people are talking about it. So it used to be workloads. Now I think we're kind of moving up more into like platform enablement, right? Like what you want to do. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and cloud in general, where you're seeing some of the shifts, and then why don't you dig in a little bit into like why Microsoft? Because it's not just, to your point, you've been leading this practice now for a couple of years, but you have a passion for it. Like you see there's something really cool here within the Microsoft stack. Why don't you talk a little bit about that as well? I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and make sure I don't get too far ahead here. Because I do get passionate about this. We started out our conversations with, do you have a cloud first strategy? We don't do that anymore, and we haven't done that for several years because everybody's in the cloud. And what does that mean? If you think back to 2015, that's when we'd ask that question. We started seeing the changes of it's no longer an admin or a server admin. You're a cloud admin. So if that workload was on premise and they were running a private cloud, they were a cloud admin. And since then, that change has been coming and snowballing, and now here we are. And now you talk about identity providers and think about, okay, that is my new edge. My edge is no longer my firewall. Well, why is my identity provider my new edge? Because we're cloudifying all the apps. Almost every app we use, almost everywhere on any device, is out in the cloud. So it's no longer a cloud first strategy. So it's been nice to see the snowball effect and how we're taking advantage of all the facets and the capabilities of running our workload in the cloud.
Yeah, that's good points. And I like what you said, like we kind of lose track of time, and I think COVID certainly helped with that. Like calendars are all weird in our heads, but you think 2015 versus now, from a chronology perspective, it's not that far, but in a technology world, it's like light years. And so you can see time compression and how fast things are moving. And I would argue that a really big reason for that is the cloud, the opportunity for organizations to move so much quicker because the underlying infrastructure is really no longer the barrier. They have access to unlimited compute, at least in current speeds and formats. We have more than enough storage. And then when you look at regionality, that's really where I think public cloud providers separate themselves, is proximity, access, right? At the end of the day, workload placement is really paramount into proximity. Like that's where it all starts from, what you're trying to do with that workload and the like. So It is fun now that when people talk about cloud, it is just an assumed, I'm putting some, if not all, of my workload into a cloud. It's just a question of which cloud for which use case, right?
Yeah.
Which is neat.
And that's really, I wanted to expand on that a little bit too, is which cloud? Which cloud makes sense? And you hit the nail on the head. It's really about workload, and it's also about proximity, meaning, all right, I'm sitting over in New York. Do I put my workload in West US? Do I put it in the UK? No, no, no. You want your workload as close to the end user as possible, but then replication and have some geo separation of your data and get it to another region. And that's really what the big cloud players like ourselves and others bring to the table to help people work on finding the best location for their workloads. Depending on also, it also depends on their SLAs to the business and their customers as well. When we start designing, where do we want to put your data? And then you start getting into data sovereignty issues, GDPR and some, I wouldn't say issues, that's probably the wrong word, but different compliances which require data sovereignty. So that also plays into where the workloads should be. And for the fortunate thing is a lot of the large cloud providers provide options. Now we kind of look at, okay, we know they're there. What services do they offer? So then you got to start looking at, okay, I see I can have a presence there. I can have a compute workload. What else can I do? Can I do analytics? Can I do BI? Can I do data warehousing? Can I do protection, resiliency, and all that other stuff? And you start to have to look at that. So I think you hit the nail on the head again is proximity and what type of workload you're looking to serve out.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I appreciate it. I think, for folks that as you continue to look, or maybe you're already big into cloud, like you have a huge cloud practice, whether it's in your enterprise or maybe you're a service provider, plugged in. JP spends a lot of time. I spend a lot of time speaking, training, educating on the industry, kind of where it's going, why it's heading this way, what we're seeing in competition, what we're seeing in customer use cases. And what I find that's really interesting about Azure in general, and we'll talk about that now, dig in here, is I think folks in the past, and when I say past, I mean measured in just a trailing 3 years, were really centrally focused on platform differentiation. And so it started with proximity, it got into platform, feature enablement, and they would dig into deeper content like containers, right? Or microservices and how they can create those advanced things. What's interesting is, we've talked about the Broadcom shift and how that's impacted the market in the last, 6 months, but particularly in the last quarter, where partners now had to say, hey, like, I've got to really rethink what am I doing on a go-forward basis, because the incumbent, the largest private cloud provider, was and is currently remains Broadcom, right? And so when you have that mostly monopoly, in that space, you get to do certain things. And unfortunately, you can use your power for good or for evil. It's each to determine. But when costs go up dramatically, old conversations start to come about. So this interesting phenomenon that's happening is, just a few years ago, we were talking about public cloud or differentiating between Azure and AWS to get into advanced conversations like miniatures or microservices, containers, and the like. Now, here we are 3 years later, and we're kind of going back 6 years, 7 years, getting back into infrastructure as a service conversations, and basically getting down to the studs of the house that we need to reconsider how we're building this for long-term velocity because of Broadcom. So it's a good and a bad. Some customers are frustrated, like, why are we having this conversation again? We made a decision. We're in a depreciation cycle, right? We've got cost of capital out there. Like, they've got that. But there's the other side of this where folks are kind of excited because they're like, you know what? By no fault of my own, I'm forced to revisit maybe design decisions I made years back without knowing truly what do I want to do with things that were now going to become available, like AI, ML, and specifically in Microsoft world, you're seeing Copilot and the use cases for that, right? Reminds me very similar like SharePoint, 12, 15 years ago when people were building Goliath businesses on SharePoint implementation. So JP, why don't you talk a little bit about just Azure in general, why you like that cloud stack, and then more specifically, like our current offering and then our roadmap, like where are we going and why should customers care?
Yeah, I'll break it off in pieces here, and I'll start with the first part. and then you'll have to remind me as we go through
Sure.
this to be on track. But why do I like Azure? Well, it's where our focus and our targets are right now. It's really small enterprise and SMB. That's where we focus a lot of our attention for our customer base. And a lot of those shops are using Microsoft in one form or another, either through 365 or they use, let's take it back even further, right? We started out using productivity apps. We finally made the big switch from WordPerfect 5.1 to Word 2.0 back in the early 2000s. Anyway, ever since then, we've been on in Microsoft productivity apps. Well, then the shift to 365, right? 365 started doing what? It made us a little bit easier to, especially for the admins, to go out there and manage and monitor and maintain those productivity workload deployments, right? Because everything's now in the cloud. We just got to back it up, protect the data, make sure we can restore it, and we're good. So we have a lot of SMBs that follow that same path, right? So they're either right now subscribing to 365 licensing or enterprise agreements. And then the Microsoft enterprise agreements, as you well know, particularly they incentivize, I'll use the word incentivize. They incentivize you to put workloads out in Azure, to use Entra ID as your identity provider, to federate that with your on-prem Active Directory stack that you still may have there. And so I guess the evolution of Microsoft has kind of helped customers realize and take advantage of a wider stack from Microsoft and really make that leap now where it's no longer a cloud first strategy, it's a cloud adoption strategy and making sure we're doing it right. And by the way, we now have our identity provider, so we have our identities out there in Microsoft. We have our productivity apps out with Microsoft. We're doing authentication out through those channels as well out in Microsoft. It only makes logical sense then to cloud workloads in Azure so you can work everything together and really take advantage of that tight integration. So that's really why we started out with Azure, is because a lot of our customers fell into that bucket where they were using or relied heavily on Microsoft for in their identity protection and or productivity apps.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. And I like the connection to history so folks can understand, like that's, I guess that's the positive, as you and I joke, right, about we're not as young as we used to be. We have a lot of experience. But it's nice to understand how we got here, because it's really helpful when you're consulting with somebody that, this is a lot like this, right? Or this is a lot like that, and how we got here, because it really helps you understand the purpose of technology and how it's continued to evolve and where it serves the customer need. And so to that point, right, one of the things that I like to talk about when we get into Azure and our customers is this, and that is, and I'm going to let Jason comment on this as well, and have you comment on this, Jay, is, why OTAVA and why Managed Azure, which is what we offer. So I'm going to take a step back, because here's a big issue that I see. I did a speaking engagement this morning. Same issue came up in the room, which is customers are still too narrowly focused on Azure versus AWS instead of the business need. Like, what industry are you in? Are you in agriculture? Are you in, automotive? Are you in finance? Are you in healthcare? Like, what industry are you in? What is your business objective? What are you trying to accomplish in terms of how do you define taking market share and making an impact, right? Those are the questions that you should be getting from your technology partners. They should be spending their time there, not talking about federation, architecture design, regional placement, workload prioritization. We can do that, but that is not that conversation that should be happening. That is a pull-through piece of the conversation when you've already gotten past the value proposition and identification. I got it. I know exactly this is the right partner. This is where I want to go. If the conversations aren't centered on the business, it doesn't matter which cloud offering you pick. I don't care if you pick AWS or Azure or VMware, you're going to miss the mark because you're choosing a product and then trying to jam that business case into that technology. And so, JP, talk a little bit about that, because that was one of your big passions. When you started this, you said, man, I've been doing VMware forever. I have a ton of experience. I love the flexibility and elasticity of public cloud, the ability to help customers get up and going quick. So that was a huge draw, right? But you also love the just natural, it's easy to adopt Microsoft. They make it easy, to get into that cloud. But it's not Microsoft's responsibility to help you manage that cloud environment well, right? And so we said, hey, we want to put together an offering that adds value, to what the customer is trying to do. And so hence came our managed offering. And so we don't offer Azure without support and services and guidance. So talk a little bit about that, because you've been paramount to our success to date, on where we are.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting, and a lot of people have heard this term before called rogue IT, right? It happens, and we see a lot of our either prospects that we're talking to or current customer base, which we have quite a few, that have a business unit that went out and did this in public cloud because why? It was easy. And that's what you hear. It was easy. I put a credit card in, I got resources. It was easy. So barrier to entry is very low to public cloud. So that's why adoption has gone through the roof. And I would agree with you. Depending on what you want to do, maybe a multi-cloud solution makes more sense. Maybe it makes more sense to put your production workload under a contractual agreement with certain cloud providers like an OTAVA and put your dev test workloads out in public cloud where you can spin down, spin them up, take advantage of different savings plans, and really take advantage of scaling when you need to and shutting down when you need to for those type of workloads. The reason you mentioned about liking Azure, what I've seen with Microsoft that I've been very pleased to see is the R&D efforts. When you look just 5 years ago, you look at market share from AWS compared to Microsoft Azure, there's a big delta. And each year, Microsoft has clawed and clawed and clawed their way back, and where now, even though there's still a delta, it's a lot less. Well, why is that? It's their R&D efforts, because they're really focusing on driving business outcomes. And when I say that, they make it easy. You talk about data repositories. Let's kind of get from compute into data repositories. So Microsoft SQL being one of the biggest ones, so many people are familiar with that stack already. And so they made it very easy to migrate your SQL workloads out to Azure and take advantage of different packages that Azure has. Like, okay, let's analyze your data. Let's drive business intelligence from your data. Let's take your Dynamics workloads, which is making a big splash out there right now, and let's take all this data and let's get some BI from it and learn from it. And so that's where I think Microsoft has done a great job. And then you throw on Copilot on top of all I read a figure, I think it was the other day, of how many billions, I think it was $40 billion over the next 5 years that Microsoft plans on spending on just security alone. And then you top that with AI and Copilot. It's just the amount of R&D is coming back to my original point of why I really like how we're aligning our resources for our customers to drive business outcomes with the Azure stack.
Yeah, I love it. That's great wisdom and great feedback. And now I would say, for customers on here particularly, or partners, if you're talking to customers, as complex as cloud has become, in terms of the offering, whether it's private cloud, on-prem private cloud, if you want to keep it in your own control, multi-cloud, fully public cloud, you can slice it and dice it, right? Like I try to tell people the benefit of the right partner, whether it's OTAVA, obviously we're biased, or it's another partner, right? Like our focus is, our head is in the clouds, yours shouldn't be, right? And that's what we try to do, is to make sure that we're always understanding where's the technology going, how does that align to business values, and tie that back to the segment, that you're in. But at the end of the day, you're a lot more similar, meaning you against your other competitors in your space or just customers in general, than you are different. And at the end of the day, the decisioning really comes down to 3 critical areas, which is 1, staff costs, right? How much does it cost to manage your current environment? And I don't mean just the basic COGS model of, if you're a service provider, or just expense and payroll if it's enterprise, of headcount. I mean the cost to sustain good talent that can keep up with market change, right? Because there's an expectation now in technology that it is truly embraced now, more like medicine or law, or some of those areas where it costs a lot of money to stay highly educated, meaning highly relevant in a space today, and maximize the investments that you're regularly putting into your IT infrastructure and related services. So 1, can you afford it? And can you get enough talent that you keep them and they stay focused and engaged? And then do they have the right skills for the second biggest issue that organizations collectively are facing across this, which is why companies like OTAVA exist, and it's where we thrive, and that is security. Understanding best practices. And we've been doing security in and of itself in one way or another, whether it's physical security, protection over co-location and hosting, all the way now into logical and protections that are tied to workload hosting and protection. Security is really important. Like, it is 30 plus years that we've been doing it. And I can't say this enough. This is an area where most people confuse compliance with security, cut some corners, try to save some money, and it costs them dearly later. And you're seeing that with ransomware. And you're seeing all the consequences of all of the ransomwares happening to other people, even not you, which is there's rising pressure to have better skill. There's visibility at a board level. There's rising insurance premiums for cyber protection, right? So there is a cost to play with staffing. So still staffing becomes the number one issue. Security becomes the number two issue. And the number three issue that everybody has is cost control, which ironically really starts with issue number one and issue number two, because it costs a lot for staff and it costs a ton for security. And so now you're getting into, okay, I'm trying to maximize efficiencies of the platform that I'm buying. And that again is where I think OTAVA comes in and does a fantastic job of helping that. And certainly other competitors in the industry have great value propositions as well. So JP, why don't you real quick, just when you think about where we are today in Azure, and a customer asks you this all the time. So let's just do this as we kind of get ready to close out our segment. Why OTAVA? Like, why should somebody look at us and say, man, I can get this, which they're right, from a lot of different people. But why should I really get it from OTAVA? What makes you different and set apart that I should take that into consideration?
Years of experience. And I say that with a big heart here, meaning that we're able to walk our customers through a journey. And it's more than likely a journey they have not been down yet. I mentioned Rogue IT before. That's a journey in itself, but that's not a journey on the right path according to best practices, adopting proper cloud adoption frameworks like Microsoft has. So you build that foundational level so you can really take advantage of everything the cloud has to offer. And what we've seen and why we built this practice out to help our customers that are moving workloads out there is because they needed hand-holding. They needed somebody to lead them on this journey out to public cloud, because even though, like I mentioned earlier, the barriers to entry is very low, the adoption needs to be part of a planning cycle. And too many people forgo that because consuming those resources, they make it very easy. It's almost a trap, if you will. But the good thing about Microsoft and any other major cloud provider, they give you adoption frameworks that should be thought out. It should be part of the journey. And unfortunately, some people just don't take the time or have the time to be able to follow that. And that's where OTAVA comes in, is to help them along that journey, because we've been through it. We've been through the 6 phases of the cloud adoption framework. We have the documentation. We have the diagrams. We're taking into account best practices, networking to compute, to data repository, to security, to compliancy. And you start thinking, and that can be overwhelming. And so that's where OTAVA really brings in the value, is to lead them through that journey, because it is a journey. It's not, let me adopt a resource, put some data out there, and oh, I'm good. No. That's where we come into play, is to walk them through. You mentioned a couple other things that I hear in the field quite often. One is migration or barrier to entry out there. How do I do this? There are easy ways, and so we know how to get those workloads out and migrate them out into Azure and put them into Azure resources. So that's really not a big concern. That's part of the planning and the journey process that we walk our customers through. But you mentioned another one, and that's cost containment. And what I like about what Azure does, and they all do something similar, but Azure purchased a company about 6-7 years ago to really evaluate the workloads. And I'd say borderline FinOps, if you will, but it really gives you insight into the resources you're using and how much, to a point where you can set budgets, notifications, and some predictability about what you're doing. So if you do have a division that's using more resources, you can quickly be notified what's going on or when. Now, it's not 100% cost containment. I will not use that word in a sentence with public cloud other than what I just did here. but because there's no such thing, right? But cost predictability and control and visibility and taking advantage of that. We also do that as part of our delivery of the infrastructure and migrating workloads out there. So it's not just making sure your compute is good, your resiliency is good, your DR strategies are good, your data protection strategies are good, your security strategies are good, your compliancy strategies are good, but also visibility, because that is the visibility of those workloads. And that's the value of OTAVA. It's not a one and done either. There's an iterative process in there that you have to go back and evaluate. We do that each month where we go through to see what's going on, and we do alert our customers if we do notice something that is not usual, especially when it comes to cost. Or we also, given what happened just last week, we won't mention any names here on this because who knows when this is going to be consumed, but people will probably remember that. We do research, so if an issue does come up, we're on the back end, so we're an extension of their IT team doing research for them so we can come to a conclusion or mediate or whatever we need to do, mitigate, whatever we need to do to get to the bottom of an issue, because things are constantly changing in IT. Sometimes the change we have no control over, but it's also great to have a team like OTAVA that you can reach out to help you get to the bottom of it.
That's great feedback. Thank you, Jason. And I mean, I hope if you're still tuned in, right, or watching this in part, like that's proof of value right there. What Jason just gave you is some, competitive market intelligence and insights from the forums that we spend time in, the advisory boards that we sit on, the work groups that we participate in, the ongoing training and education, right? And while I mentioned that OTAVA has been doing this for 30 years, we're part of an organization at Houske Communications that's been doing this for greater than 150 years. Right. And we are 6 generations in. And so it's important to understand, like, we have a heritage of connecting people to technology and doing it well. And that's really what differentiates OTAVA. This is who we have been for a very long time and evolving as the world evolves. And so I'm really excited that we're getting to start in the notice now, plugging these things as we're getting further into our journey on this platform, to share. So if you are tuning in and maybe this is your first time and you like what you heard, you want to learn more and yet also plugged in to hear the leadership side some more, we do a ton of work on that because we believe in giving back and developing, good leadership. There's no such thing as bad companies. There's good leadership and bad leadership, and they make for good company performance and bad company performance, respectively. We want you to subscribe and like and follow and share. That's the greatest gift that you could give, is just putting the message out there and getting people connected. We offer regular webinars for education and content series, free consults if you just want to spend some time and pick the brain of somebody like Jason, learn a little bit more about OTAVA and really more importantly about your issue and what you're working through and kind of the guidance that you'd like. We would love to spend time with you. So Jason, I would say thanks for spending time today and talking about what we're both excited about, which is cloud and solving problems for customers using it, but more specifically Azure and our Managed Azure offering. And so if you're a customer looking for help in that space, we do it different. And we're really excited to spend some time with you and show you how to maximize your investment in Microsoft, including Copilot. So feel free to connect with us direct on that. But Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Yep, happy to be here.
All right. Have a great one, everybody.
All right, so in closing, we only have one more episode in this season.
Crazy.
2 seasons in. So thank you for joining us. Next week or next episode, we'll talk about the power of networking. And we'll also have our friends at TechPoint join us, and they're going to talk about what they're doing in Indiana to promote the growing tech industry. Easy for me to say. So like, share, subscribe, send feedback if you read the noticer.
All the things.
Send us a note about that. And as we say, do a decision.